on Facebook as of now.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So should we get started, or should we give it a little bit more time to let folks come in?
We can give it another minute.
Okay.
Give it another minute, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
So great to see so many friends joining us.
And we're live. That's good.
Okay, so should I go ahead and kick us off?
Go for it.
Sure.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. And I am filling in for another one of our Deliberately Fair Housing members, but I am Farrah Wilder. I'm CAR Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, proud member of Deliberately Fair Housing, and also a liaison friend, I guess former, when it was less formal, member of California Association of Black Real Estate Professionals. And I'm really proud to be introducing this event, this presentation with an amazing author, Dr. Alison Rose Jefferson, which we are pleased to be hearing from and learning from. So it is Black History Month, and we are very honored to be a part of the celebration and commemoration of the accomplishments and history of the Black community and of our Black real estate realtors and industry leaders.
Area is, and you look at every county in a.
We need someone to be muted. Sorry.
That's the area. So you go.
So we're doing something. So we're doing something. So okay, and I've got a little echo, so maybe if folks can mute. So we're doing something a little bit differently this time. So Deliberately Fair Housing has, usually put on their own kind of events on their Facebook page, but we are collaborating with the California Association of Black Real Estate Professionals. And you're going to be hearing a lot more from KBREP this month. They are putting on a lot of great Black History Month events, and we are very honored to be a part of one of their first events that they're having within the real estate community. And so again, we're here to discuss this amazing book, Living the California Dream, by Dr. Alison Rose Jefferson. You can see her with us. And we're also pleased to have Jennifer Branchini, CAR Treasurer, joining us. So just be sure that you're on mute. Questions? Oh, yep. Am I missing something?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted, this is Crystal. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Before we get started, I just wanted to read our mission statement for our brand new association that Farrah mentioned, the California Association of Black Real Estate Professionals. I just wanted to let you guys know what we're about. We are a network for advancing Black realtors as business leaders in the industry and in our communities. We are advocates for increasing Black home ownership. We fully embrace our members by acknowledging, mentoring, supporting, and developing them into industry leaders nationally and locally. So I just wanted to go ahead and let you know that that's what we're about. And as Farrah said, you're going to see a lot of programming from us as we celebrate our official kickoff this month. And until look for programming, we'll have it all over your socials. So thank you, and I will toss it back to Farrah.
No worries. I was just about done. All I wanted to say is to make sure that, you put questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat to make sure that we let our panelists know, or Crystal know what the questions are, and be sure that you're on mute. But we just welcome you all and are glad to be in discussion with you. And I think I am turning it over to, I thought I was turning it over to Crystal, but maybe I'm turning it over to Jennifer.
I will gladly take that. Thank you, Farah. Thank you so much for having me here today. I am Jennifer Branchini, the 2021 Treasurer for California Association of Realtors, and I'm absolutely thrilled to and honored to have or be able to introduce historian professor Dr. Alison Rose Jefferson. She's a third generation Californian, and we're so grateful that you're here today and look forward to hearing from you. I know Farah got into a little bit of your history, and I'm just going to go through. It's a very impressive bio, and your background is incredible. So I really, truly hope that the group knows just how amazing you are. So presently, her research and professional interests revolve around the intersection of historical memory, American history, and history of the African-American experience in Southern California during the 20th century Great Migration and the Jim Crow era, heritage conservation, spatial justice, and cultural tourism. She's also interested in her work's intersections with the experiences of people of African descent in other global settings. And I know you heard about her book, but today she'll be giving an overview of her book, Living the California Dream, African-American Leisure Sites During the Jim Crow Era. It examines how African-Americans pioneered leisure in Americans' frontier of leisure through their attempts to create communities and business projects in conjunction with the growing African-American population of Southern California during that time. Dr. Jefferson has participated in numerous public programs, including ongoing history public engagement events, lectures, museum exhibitions, oral history interview research, the creation of commemorative monuments, landmark site designations, and documentary films. Her work as a historian has been featured in public TV programming, including the 2018 Emmy Award-winning Coded Geographies about the Green Book, the Negro Motorist Travel Guide, news feature segments from CBS LA, KTLA TV news programs. Jefferson has been interviewed for and contributed to articles for Los Angeles Magazine, the Los Angeles and New York Times newspapers, to just name a few, and the list goes on. Again, we're so honored to have her here with us today. Dr. Jefferson, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you all so much for inviting me to participate in your program today for Black History Month. And you know, we are talking, my book does talk about place, and there's a lot of real estate involved in my book. So I was really intrigued that you guys thought to invite me to come and talk about my book and some of the stories that I have unearthed. So I'm going to now share my screen. Okay, can you guys see it? Hello? Okay, thank you.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I'm getting there in terms of organization here. Okay, so African Americans began moving in large numbers to the Los Angeles environs in the decades surrounding the turn of the 20th century, joining communities of whites and Jews, Chinese, Japanese, old Californios, and new Mexican immigrants, as well as migrants of other backgrounds. The majority of new Black migrants relocated from American southern states. Like those who moved to the northeastern part of the United States, African Americans moving to California and other western parts also acted to escape the worst of Jim Crow era anti-Black racial restrictions. African Americans similarly to others who moved to the state, embraced the booster, promoted California dream of a leisure lifestyle in picturesque outdoor settings and new life opportunities, even while discrimination and lax enforcement of California's civil rights laws that were implemented as early as 1893 for decades into the 20th century prevented them from using various public and private facilities and buying land in many areas. Despite the challenges, African Americans actively participated in California's development through the early 20th century's Great Migration. They bought homes and other property, raised families, launched businesses, created social and faith institutions, and nurtured a rich cultural milieu that included the emergence of West Coast jazz. So today, I am going to offer some brief remarks about my recent book, Living the California Dream, African-American Leisure Sites During the Jim Crow Era. You will learn a bit about how African-Americans made California an American history by challenging racial and class structures when they occupied recreational sites and public space at the core of the state's formative mid-20th century identity. These sites became contested ground in the development of attractive inland resorts and beaches relatively free from white citizens' harassment. In Los Angeles, recreation and relaxation were essential components of liberty and a distinctive civil concern in the nation's long freedom rights struggle. I'll also share some ways I, as a historian, and others have used a few of these stories to engage audiences in history as well as heritage and nature conservation and social and environmental justice education, in some places more successfully than others. I offer a view of overlooked, erased, extraordinary community builders and socioeconomic development experiences of Black middle-class people of Los Angeles and California, and the impact that leisure, the impact of leisure that intersects with the new scholarship about the influence of the diverse output of the Harlem Renaissance and the new Negro experience as a cultural movement of national and global phenomena. These stories of unrecognized voices, economic development initiative, and civil rights struggles add new information and understanding about how African Americans sought to seize their California and American dreams to appropriate and shape the offerings of their new environment in the far West. These stories I recapture and recast the significance, meaning, and place of leisure by recognizing African American leadership and action, therefore giving a more complex understanding of the American experience in the West and California, where racial discrimination existed in practice rather than legally, as in many other states of the nation in the post-enslavement modern capitalist era. In contrast to the city where most Black Angelenos lived, California waterfront and pastoral places where they went to relax and invest and invested in real estate included Bruce's Beach down in Manhattan Beach. You can see where that is in relationship to Los Angeles. It also included Santa Monica Bay, Santa Monica South Beach area, that was sometimes controversially called the Inkwell, and Eureka Villa in Santa Clarita Valley. All of these places were in Los Angeles County. Lake Elsinore in the Inland Empire, and also Corona's Park Ridge Country Club and both of these places were in Riverside. And there's a few other places that I cover in the book also. The stories of California's largest and most popular, though not broadly remembered, African-American leisure destinations were sites of pleasure, identity. They were sites of challenge to racist anti-Black public policies and private practices, and economic development that flourished for different time durations between the 1900s to the 1960s. These are the stories of public and private memories of African Americans of all socioeconomic backgrounds. The new Negro who migrated out of the US South to the northern Midwestern, to northern, Midwestern, and far Western cities in the post-World War I decades to escape racial injustice. These migrants, including soldiers arriving home from Europe after the Great War, were much more self-confident and sometimes militant in their demands for their rights as citizens and consumers. Race, power, privilege, and wealth often influenced leisure opportunities, just as it determined who was able to take advantage of economic and social opportunities in California. Even with these impacts, African-American leisure builders and seekers through creative assertion claimed and performed full humanity, civic membership, social and economic development, resourcefulness, and self-determination. The history is layered with stories about group and individual circumstances and chronicles of migration patterns, socioeconomic status, cultural practices, and education and employment opportunities, and social power. These multifaceted, intersecting experiences and stories that took place in private and public spaces are inseparable from one another in their composition and reflection of the structural racial exclusion and class exploitation imposed on African Americans and other people of color. In their pursuit of emotional and physical rejuvenation, they were unwilling to accept exclusion. Black Angelenos, like their counterparts in other parts of, in other places around the country, developed separate leisure spaces against oppressive racial subjugation of the era and to promote a renewed sense of racial pride, cultural self-expression, economic independence, and progressive politics that were the embodiment of the new Negro determined to achieve a fuller participation in American society. The experiences and memories of these leisure spaces and destinations and the attention they gained in public memory and newspapers of the era offered African Americans new and broader visions of themselves, a new identity, and a new collective sense of freedom, contributing to cultural and intellectual efforts that define the new Negro. In California, African Americans' ambitions and initiatives for leisure space also radically claimed, challenged, and promoted the state's identity in the consumption of leisure as a lifestyle that would spread across the country to develop a new suburban middle-class culture and forceful marker of American citizenship and identity, generally speaking. Black Angelenos challenged the era's white supremacist conventions about social space as they asserted self-determination to participate in popular leisure and resort cultural, social, and economic trends that were considered modern by the 1920s. In ex-urban communities, African Americans bought property so they could control their own enjoyment of these activities and contest white racism. Particularly, they were challenging whites' prejudice and power, racism, in the labeling of African Americans as laborers and as inferior. Common and divergent patterns of many African American leisure retreats in California and across the US are important to reconstruct and preserve for the memory and heritage of these sites and proper understanding of them as places of commerce, social networks, community, identity, contestation, and civil rights. Each site has its own history of development of leisure of a specific sort, as well as racialized issues of the time and place. One of the earliest places African Americans went for rejuvenation and recreation was Lake Elsinore in Riverside County, a somewhat successful residential and leisure destination for the general population and African Americans through the middle decades of the 20th century. This was one of the farthest inland of the African American leisure spaces that existed from around the 1910s to the 1960s. The vagaries of lake conditions and changing leisure tastes and race relation dynamics over the years impacted African American entrepreneurs' resort business opportunities and success. The African American presence has been left out of local history narratives and landmark designation programs. This omission obstructs our understanding of the full shared collaborative history of the range of community builders and their impact and contributions to the development of Lake Elsinore and to the Southern California region. The Corona Park Ridge Country Club in Riverside was a private elite club and leisure space originally built for a white clientele only. A group of very ambitious African-American businessmen, Journey White, who was also a veteran of World War I and a real estate agent, a physician, Eugene C. Nelson, and Clarence R. Bailey, purchased the site to operate as an interracial space and an attempt at Black community and an attempt at Black community suburbanization and Black community elite recreation. And this purchase happened in 1927. The local elite and other white racist citizens strongly contested the African American reconstruction of this Corona community venture. The African American businessmen's efforts to make this venture a success have been left out of local history narrative, thereby limiting, again, our understanding of the Corona community's historical actors and evolution. Eureka Villa, later known as Valverde, in the Santa Clarita Valley area of North Los Angeles County, was initially an African-American planned resort community development project with white American partners that began in 1924. An early leader of this project was Black real estate entrepreneur, or I like to call him Black real estate impresario and booster, Sidney P. Dones. Public money contributed to the development of a park and swimming pool, and multiple marketing efforts by boosters, both Black and white, helped sustain interest of African-American consumers' usage of this hidden canyon area until the crumbling of the racial apartheid era in the 1960s. By 2015, the Val Verde community has been recast as one of the last rural areas remaining with affordable housing in the Santa Clarita Valley with limited public memory of the African-American heritage. Bruce's Beach in Manhattan Beach, a Pacific Rim community in southwestern Los Angeles County, was an early successful African-American residential resort community and leisure destination, which began in 1912. Eventually, racial exclusionary measures aided by destructive use of state power in 1924 eliminated their residential and economic development with attempts to erase the site's memory from history. Only through political assertion has a limited revival of the history of Bruce's Beach and its incorporation into the public record emerged in the first decades of the 21st century. The Bruce's Beach community and its visitors were not alone in facing legal sanctions and private harassment actions discouraging African Americans from visiting and settling in particular beach locations as the region's population increased during the 1920s. During this decade, several Save the Beach campaigns were implemented to keep African Americans from creating and maintaining beachfront resorts at multiple California beach towns in the 1920s. North of Bruce's Beach in 1922 and in 1925, African Americans were forced to give up on developing beachfront resorts in Santa Monica and El Segundo, respectively. Numerous white-run civic and business groups, including some in the Santa Monica Bay, supported the action against these proposed beach resort plans. Other beach resorts suffered similar fates. The most violent intimidation campaign carried out by whites to evict African Americans from enjoying the beach was the destruction of the nearly completed Pacific Beach Club in Huntington Beach. Arsonists burned this beautiful new facility to the ground shortly before it was to open in 1926. There were confrontations and assaults across decades, some which turned violent, aimed to bar African Americans from public beaches, the most coveted California recreation and recreation destination then and also today. Activists mounted legal challenges to these discriminatory practices that were endeavored by whites. In their first organized civil disobedience action in the region, members of the Los Angeles branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in 1927 challenged Manhattan Beach officials when they tried measures to make the beach white only. Although the Bruce's Beach community was raised when the NAACP member staged a swim-in protest after they were arrested, fined, and did a few legal maneuvers, clarification was one that African Americans had the legal right to enjoy this and all California beaches. In the coming decades, with this accomplishment, African Americans more confidently were able to assert their legal rights, and this contributed to racial restriction attempts at state public beaches fading away. The victory energized Afro-Angelenos. At this time, the NAACP National Office proclaimed in a press release this militant stance for civil rights in Southern California set a good backdrop for their 19th convention that would be held in Los Angeles in 1928. As the 20th century advanced, African Americans around the US would increasingly utilize legal actions and public protests to dismantle legally sanctioned, along with informally enforced discrimination and segregation in public accommodations. After various waves of local citizens, sometimes contentious public discussion about their municipality's heritage over many years, in 2007, the site not officially recognized as Bruce's Beach was formally commemorated by Manhattan Beach city leaders and citizens with a Pacific Oceanfront Park named in its honor, and a descriptive text plaque with gross inaccuracies 80 years after the Black resort community was removed. The public commemoration opened a broader claim for not just public memory, but also American identity, even with the signage text that dilutes, misrepresents, and partially omits the site's historical truth and understanding. Fast forward to 2020, new energy has arisen to reclaim the important marginalized California ocean coastline history of African American places of enjoyment, freedom struggle, and community and economic development, sabotaged during the Jim Crow era. Bruce's Beach in Manhattan Beach and the area in Santa Monica called Bay Street became, which was sometimes controversially called the Inkwell, became sites of consciousness, reflection, and healing for memorial and celebratory events at a time last year when systematic racial inequalities were laid bare by the long history of injustice that had led to the death of several African Americans and other people of color. Events held at these sites were a show of solidarity with nationwide protests, really with global-wide protests against systematic anti-Black racism and police gratuitous brutality, which the Black Lives Matter movement has forced prominently onto the national and global agenda as part of a reclamation of and commitment to the Black freedom rights struggle. Celebrations were also held for Father's Day and Juneteenth, which was June 19th, the day enslaved African Americans in Galveston, Texas, learned the Civil War had ended 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Joining the current national and global movement around social initiatives to address anti-Black racism, Manhattan Beach officials and citizens set up a task force to devise a plan and a timetable to accurately revise and illuminate the Bruce's Beach history on the park signage and develop other related public education programming. Santa Monica's elected officials and citizens also are developing new initiatives to foster meaningful change and advancement for equality and inclusion in the Bay City. Even though African Americans were chased out of Manhattan Beach early in the 20th century, they were able to build a sustained community in the Bay City that was founded in the late 1880s, a few blocks from the Pacific shoreline in the environs of what is today Phillips Chapel Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, the first African-American church established in the city of Santa Monica. A short way south was a Venice neighborhood, which was also part of the Santa Monica African-American community. In the years surrounding Phillips Chapel's beginnings in 1908 at 4th and Bay Streets, the oceanfront area down the hill around Pico, south a few blocks to Bicknell Avenue, emerged as a gathering place where African Americans from all over Los Angeles County and beyond came to enjoy the beach's pleasures. While the boundaries shifted through time, it was a popular beach destination for African Americans from around the 1900s to the 1960s. Many of the beachgoers once referred to this stretch of coastline as the Bay Street Beach. And as I mentioned, some people controversially called it the Inkwell. The latter name, you can be sure, was most certainly derogatory, and it was first used by whites, referring to the skin color of the Black beachgoers. Some African Americans reclaimed the name and used it as a badge of pride. Some who went to this beach never used the name for the place. And in contemporary times, there are people who still would prefer that the name not be used. African American regional residents and Los Angeles entrepreneurs attempting leisure space service business expansion for their community were challenged by various white supremacist public policy and private measures inhibiting residential expansion and economic development. Nonetheless, African American citizens, public beach usage, and a small local residential community were able to persist despite Santa Monica's white elite racist anti-Black actions. The local African-American community's persistence has mattered in the reclamation of place and memory in the 21st century, heritage conservation efforts and public history programming that has been initiated by citizens groups and public officials. This and other Southern California leisure spaces mark an African American identity on the regional landscape and social space as they confronted the emergent power politics of leisure space and set the stage for these sites as places for remembrance of invention and public contest. The city of Santa Monica in 2005, the city of Santa Monica's 2005 landmark designation of Phillips Chapel Christian Methodist Episcopal Church set the stage in 2008 for the official recognition with a local cultural monument, set the stage for an official recognition with a local cultural monument, the space that was the historical African-American gathering place at Bay Street and the oceanfront. Also recognized was Nick Gabaldon, the first documented surfer of African-American and Mexican-American descent in the Santa Monica Bay. African Americans' actions to use this and other beaches embody the local stories that contribute to the national narrative of mass movement to open leisure space to all, demonstrating how the struggle for leisure and public space, along with political and economic issues, reshaped the long freedom rights struggle. In June 2019, this same area was honored with a listing as the Bay Street Beach Historic District on the National Register of Historic Places for its significance in the African American experience in US history. This is the first historic district in Santa Monica to receive this national honor, and it is one of the few in California associated with people of color. The Santa Monica Conservancy honored Michael Blum of the Sea of Clouds organization, and myself in 2020 with the Cultural Landscape Award for our work of accomplishing this National Register listing. At Bay Street, the landmark designation infuses a cultural and natural resource site with complexities of human history and experiences, offering a critical dimension beyond beauty, rarity, and environmental protection, which strengthens objectives of both the heritage and nature conservation movements. From a social and environmental justice viewpoint, the inclusion of this history is symbolic of important social change which has occurred. It pushes forth a sense of collective cultural belonging and common membership in American society that helps informing a basis for social progress and action in the future. As a public historian, I have led coordination to facilitate remembrances of African American voices at Santa Monica's historical sites through the development of innovative public programming partnerships between the Santa Monica Conservancy, Heal the Bay, the Black Surfers Collective, Surf Academy, Los Angeles County Supervisors, and other. The benefit of ongoing investment in the pluralistic heritage and nature education programs through partnerships is important to continue building future pathways to new, wider, and younger audiences, as well as established audiences in support of heritage and nature conservation ideals. This programming, such as Nick Gavaldon Day, California and International Coastal Cleanup Day, field trips for youngsters from South Los Angeles, and the new Belmar History Plus Art Project actively connects diverse publics to more complex, culturally inclusive stories of our collective national identity, to social action, to beach access issues, ocean life, and watershed stewardship intersecting with beach recreation. As part of the California Coastal Commission's newly implemented social and environmental justice policy mandate, the city of Santa Monica was asked to develop an education and interpretive program to teach the public about the history of African Americans who lived, worked in, and visited South Beach neighborhoods prior to the waves of urban renewal projects that displaced their community before 1960 as part of the new historic Belmar Park sports field construction plan. In a year's time, I and other contributors have developed a resonating, multifaceted, educational, inspirational, and remembrance civic commemorative justice programming that's rolling out now. This program includes a context essay, an outdoor exhibition, lesson plans, a website, and community engagement programming that will bring this area's history to life for present and future generations. The state and local public initiative, this state and local public initiative opens the door towards social and environmental justice by recognizing that communities of color have a right to historical and cultural sites, along with clean air, clean water, and enjoyment of the California coastline and other of America's natural and other American natural and other resources. Like many white Americans, Black Americans were lured to California for its opportunities and the good life imagery produced by writers, painters, photographers, and movie makers, which were used by various boosters promoting migration to the state. The stories and imagery of African Americans who participated in various phases of the Western migration and settlement continue to remain largely absent from the dominant mythologies and histories surrounding the Western migration, notwithstanding investigation of the Black West published during the last 50 years. Today, I have briefly highlighted little-known stories about African-American agency and socioeconomic investment in the California dream lifestyle at what have been called the frontier of leisure, at what have been called frontier of leisure destinations in Southern California from the 1900s to the 1960s. The intersection of the stories of my book and the public process activities I have discussed for education, remembrance, and remembrance of our collective history, cultural identity, and stewardship and historical heritage will also encourage visitation to these locations and hopefully to others around the United States. As a historian, I will continue to firmly engage in encouraging people to use history for their broader education, use history for these broader education programs that I've talked about for wider equity and access for all people for the enjoyment of America, for the enjoyment of American cultural and natural places now and in the future. I hope you will take time to learn about these forgotten Black Westerners. I hope you'll take time to learn about these forgotten Black Western pioneers and their undertakings and ponder the implications of their stories for our lives today by buying and reading my book, Living the California Dream, African American Leisure Sites During the Jim Crow Era. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jefferson. That was an amazing, quick history of a different side of the Black American experience. So we really appreciate that. I was just reminiscing on why am I a water baby? I mean, growing up in San Diego, right on the beach, I mean, it was just a natural affinity to go to the beach all the time. And it was a natural thing. So I am so glad that you connected that to history for us. So what I'd like to do now for everyone is let you know the flow. We are going to have our first signed book giveaway right now. After that, we're going to have a brief chat. I'm going to ask Dr. Jefferson a couple of questions, follow-up questions, and then open it up to our partners, Deliberately Fair Housing, for any questions they would have, and to our attendees. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We will be monitoring them and we'll get as many in as we can. So for right now, I would love for, I think is Leon on with us? If we can do the first giveaway.
Actually, Crystal, this is Janet Dorsey.
Oh,
Oh my
hey,
gosh. Hi, Dr. Rose, Allison, that was just awesome. I really appreciate what you just shared with everybody. I am going to share my screen right now so that everybody can see what the wheel looks like so we can get everybody in here. As this has been going on, I've been putting everyone's name on this random wheel picker so that we can have this drawing. So let me know when you guys see it on your screen.
Okay, and thanks for doing that, Janet. Thanks for doing that.
Of
There
course.
it is.
You see it. Okay, so drum roll, somebody, please. And here we go.
This is our, yay, this is our first of 2
Yay.
giveaways, so stay with us.
And it looks like Marion George. Do you see? Is
I think
can you
I
see
see,
it?
I didn't see, oh, here's the spin. I see it spinning now a little bit.
Okay, there's a big delay then because I see the name on my screen. It's Marion
Oh, yes.
George. So is Marion George
Yay.
there? Because must be present to win. Otherwise, we can't gather data from you.
So Marion, if you are present, please put, please say yes in the chat. Okay, great. And if you could leave your mailing address for us, we'll get you that signed copy in the chat.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing.
You could make it to Crystal DaCosta. Yes, I see you. You could send it to me, Crystal DaCosta. Look for my name in the chat and give me your mailing address and we'll get it right out to you. Congratulations. Yay. Yay, Marion.
All right.
Thank you, Janet. And stick around because we're going to have another one at the end of the program. Right now, we're going to go into Q&A. But first, I wanted to have a little chat with Dr. Jefferson. And as I was reflecting on my personal experiences growing up, you know, near water in San Diego, and for as long as I can remember, weekends meant going to the beach. I was very interested in knowing what led you to this work in this specific field, because we don't often hear about the Black middle class or the Black migration from the South coming west for the California dream, like everyone else. You know, so what led you to this? And then in reading your book, I was like, oh, you know, you have an interesting family story about that connected you to this. So I'm sure it's a professional as well as a personal pull on you that brought you to this life's work. Can you talk about that?
Yes, well, my interest in this topic came from the fact that my mother's family moved to Los Angeles in the mid-1920s. My grandfather was from Virginia and he had gone to Howard Medical School. He actually was in the first medical school class at Howard. And then he went down south to Tuskegee to do his residency. And he met my grandmother down there, who was from Birmingham, and she was in Montgomery, and she had gone to Miles College and she was teaching school. And then they decided to, you know, get married, and they decided to come to California. And then they had 3 children in the 20s. And so they were part of that Black migration during, the Great Migration, and they drove cross country. And so here in Southern California, they participated in going to these places. Like, I know that one of the places they went to in particular was Lake Elsinore, because I heard stories from my mother and my uncles of them going there during the summer when they were growing up. And so I always had that in my mind. And when I was a child, they took us on a trip to Lake Elsinore in the early 60s. I was really little. And I remember going on this trip, and it was right when the water for the lake had been stabilized at that point in time. And it was just, I thought it was a beautiful place. And I was learning something about my mother and her brothers and my grandmother and this experience that they had at this place. And so then fast forward to the early 2000s, I went back to graduate school, and I was looking around for paper topics. And I was, my first foray into graduate school started in 2003, and I was working on a Master of Heritage Conservation at the University of Southern California. And so while I was in that program, I was looking around for paper topics. I wanted to write about something that was meaningful to me and that was going to keep my interest. And also, I didn't know at that point I was going to get a PhD, but I was still thinking, well, I want to write about something that I think will be meaningful to me, meaningful to my extended community, and also that might have legs afterwards. It won't just be a graduate school paper. And so I came upon thinking about Lake Elsinore and the other leisure sites that I knew about. And I wrote my first paper around 2004, I think around that time. And then I did my thesis for my master's degree on Lake Elsinore. And then I went to work for a heritage conservation firm, and I didn't know I was going to go back and get a PhD, but it had been suggested to me while I was working on the master's that I think about it. But I was like, oh, I got to get through with this master's degree first. And then I went to work for a heritage conservation firm, Historic Resources Group, for a few years. And while I was there, I realized that I really wanted to continue to pursue my interest in African-American heritage in the region. And I wasn't going to be able to do that working at one of these firms. And so, and I had gotten asked to do some presentations about the African-American leisure site in Santa Monica. And then things were happening in Manhattan Beach where they were renaming the park, Bruce's Beach. And so by 2008, I decided to apply to get a PhD, and I figured, okay, my dissertation is going to be on these African-American leisure sites, and that evolved into the book. So it was, it was a bit of a journey, but I've always been interested in history. And so I just had to find the place in my life where that was going to work. And I was reinventing myself. And so I love history, and I'm glad that I was able to do this book because, the Black middle class and economic development doesn't get written about in the way I have talked about them a lot. I mean, there's other people that have written about some of these places in other parts of the country, but people forget that as African Americans, we weren't just struggling economically and politically. We had to fight to have recreation too. But while that was happening, we were still enjoying our lives and taking advantage of what was before us in terms of opportunities. And moving to the West, for many African Americans, it was a much freer place for them than where they had come from, even though there was still discrimination here and there was segregation. It just wasn't as bad as in other parts of the country.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure the audience, we all have some stories of, moving to different places, even moving to California from the South, and can relate to some of these stories that you shared. And it's good to know that some of these places are being reclaimed, or at least memorialized, and that history is now not lost. And it's oh, thank you. Yay, Marion, the winner. I was just seeing the chat. But no, thank you so much for that. So I've another question for you. I wanted you to talk a little bit about, I understand you will be starting a new position. Congratulations. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about your other work in conservation, specifically the Central Avenue Heritage Trail and the Angels Walk LA, and then also your new position, as much as you do know about it, at Occidental College, the scholar in residence. So if you can share with us.
So the Angels Walk Heritage Trail I've been working on since 2018. Oh, I finished it then, and then there was a construction review delay that has taken us from then until now to get the thing installed on the street. And so the Angels Walk has done about 15 different heritage trails around the Los Angeles area. There's one actually that's on Crenshaw Boulevard from about Rodeo down to Leimert Park. And so this heritage trail puts stanchions, big markers on the street that have information about people, places, and events of a particular time in this place. So the one on Central Avenue is looking at the area when it was the hub of African American life from around the 1900s to the 1950s. And as many of you know, and some of you don't know, that was the area that had the Black faith institutions, the Black businesses. It's where the nightclubs were. It's where, for instance, Golden State Mutual Life Insurance first started their company, and they built their first building on Central Avenue before they moved over to Western and Adams in 1949. And that office that was there on Central, that wasn't their first office, but it was the first one they built. And that one, they had two Black architects that worked with them. That one was on Central Avenue, was built by James H. Garrett. And most people don't know who he is. He was an architect that was contemporary with Paul R. Williams, who built their other building at Adams and Western. And then there was also the Dunbar Hotel, which was built in 1927-28 to accommodate, it was originally called the Somerville Hotel, and it was built to accommodate Black people who were traveling, and also for the NAACP convention that I mentioned that was going to be here in 1928. And then there's Second Baptist, which is there. So there's lots of, the Black Panthers had their headquarters over there. So we have these stanchions that are going up on the street. It's 15 different stanchions, and they run from where the Lincoln Theater is at around 24th all the way down to a block or so south of Vernon Avenue, where the library is. And so there's various people. Ralph Bunch is talked about in one of the stanchions because he grew up in that neighborhood. And then the jazz music scene is talked about. Marion Matthews is talked about, who was the first African-American credentialed librarian in the LA City system. And she started working in the 1920s for the library. And then she went on to amass an amazing collection of African-American art and documenting African-American history with various and she also collected photographs, which visually documented African-American life, most of them from the Jim Crow era, the later.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, fascinating. I mean, you're hitting all the spots near me.
So that's going to be on the street, starting, they're installing it now, and there'll be some kind of programming that will go on around it. There's a new restaurant over there, Delicious, in the Dunbar. So when we're all able to gather, maybe your group will have an event over there at the restaurant, and we could go do a tour of.
Yep, noted. There's also a smaller restaurant takeout of Delicious in Leimert Park. So I know them well. And yeah, the things you're talking about, that's right in my area. So glad to hear it. So I don't want to hog all the time. I got one more question for you, and then we're going to open it up to our partners here for questions. And again, if you have questions, put them in the chat.
There's one question.
Crystal, I do see a couple of questions in the Q&A. So when you're done with that question, we'll move over to that.
Okay, great. You had one thing to say, Dr. Jefferson? You were about to.
There are a few questions in the chat, and your colleague called that out. So, okay.
Oh, okay. So my last question for you is about the California Fair Act. And I'm excited about this because it's so that we don't have to have this, not to put you out of a job, but we don't have to constantly reclaim our history if it is taught and a part of history in general in our K through 12 school system.
That's not going to put you out of a job. It's going to mean there's going to okay, because
well, great.
You know,
so yeah, if you could talk about that and where it is, if you know what's the status of it or your involvement in it, or
it's evolved to where we are now. Right now is the state education infrastructure, and the legislature is trying to approve exact frameworks and guidelines that will be the official things, but it's already being implemented now. Even though they haven't quite got the official guidelines together, but now in terms of the state schools, many school districts are now voluntarily adding more inclusive curriculum to their schools. And
that's great.
For people like me and others, I'm not a curriculum developer, but I did do curriculum development this year with UCLA's curriculum development unit and master teachers around the Belmar History Plus Art project. Because we were looking at the African-American experience in Santa Monica, in the beach areas that was raised, the experience that got moved out because of the urban redevelopment in that area, and also because of racism and what have you, because people couldn't afford to buy in other places that were close to the beach by the time all this was happening in the 1950s. So from that standpoint, we did elementary school, middle school, and 2 high school lessons. So we're rolling it out now, and it looks like the Santa Monica school system is going to take the curriculum and implement it so that the kids will have it by the fall. The teachers are going to learn how to, what it is, and then roll it out in schools in the fall. And then we're going to do some presentations, workshops for other districts as well. And the curriculum is going to be available on a website that any teacher could access if they would like to use the curriculum. So as it relates to more curriculum that is inclusive, there'll be more work because there's not textbooks that have this information in it generally. There's some, but generally not for grade schools. So there'll be much more reworking of textbooks, and they hire people like me to do that. I'm not a textbook writer, but that doesn't mean I won't be. So
right.
terms
Yeah.
of how the American identity will be digested for young people over the next 20 years. It's already changed over the last 20 years. I mean, it's changed from when we were kids, okay? There is more stuff that the kids are learning about more diverse people, but it's not enough.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. Well, great. I'm glad you're part of that. Yeah, and you're the connective tissue. So even if you aren't a curriculum, writer or creator, I'm glad you're involved. So I'd like to turn it over to Janet and for a couple more Q&A from the chat and from Deliberately Fair Housing, if you guys want to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's actually, there's a couple of hands raised, so I'm going to go back and forth first. So Evelyn Arnold, would you please unmute yourself? Your hand is raised first, and then we'll move over to the Q&A and then back to the hand raise and then back to the Q&A. So Evelyn. Evelyn, are you on mute still? Can you unmute yourself? Okay, well, all right, I'm going to move back over. Evelyn, if you come back in, let me know.
Up there, but she doesn't know how to unmute herself.
I can see that. I'm asking her to unmute, and so maybe she can do that now. It's not coming through, Evelyn.
Bottom left-hand corner, the little thing that says mute, and there's a red line through it. Just tap that and you should be okay. She doesn't understand. Okay.
She's not getting it. I'm going to move. Evelyn, we'll come back to you. All right. Norman Alexander asks, well, first of all, he says, Dr. Jefferson, thank you for an enlightening talk. Do you know what reason the city of Santa Monica uses to take the Belmar community eminent domain in 1950? What was it? What's in that location now?
Okay, so that's the project that I'm working on right now that's rolling out, the Belmar History Plus Art Project. And I've written about this area. There's an essay that I've written that's called Reconstruction and Reclamation, the Erased African-American Experience in Santa Monica's History. And you can find it at my website. In terms of that area, the city started taking the land through eminent domain starting in the 1940s. And the reason that they were doing this is because they wanted to expand the Civic Center. And so it just was kind of a gradual thing. And then by the late 1950s, they got the money to build the Civic Auditorium and to build the courthouse. And so then they moved everybody out of that area. It was an area that was somewhat rural. I mean, that sounds maybe strange to people now, but it was somewhat rural. It wasn't dense housing like in other parts of Santa Monica. There were some blocks where people had, a lot of space, and there were other blocks where it was apartment buildings. Small apartment buildings, and it was where the La Bonita was, which was the African-American bathhouse and cafe that lasted from the early part of the century to the 1950s. By the 1950s, it was a bar, and
oh, sorry to bother you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm able to get in, but I'm trying to
Okay,
find
now I'm going to mute her, so she's going to have to figure out how she gets unmuted. Sorry about that.
So you can unmute her when you get through. I mean,
We'll see if I can.
Okay.
Normally it's ask, but go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Jefferson.
That what transpired was that they bought the people out through eminent domain, and then they built the civic auditorium and the courthouse. And then there were some other areas that were north of where the high school is, on the east side of 4th and north of the high school, that was a neighborhood where African Americans lived also. And so when they started expanding the high school in the 30s, they started taking some of that property. And then also when the freeway came through in the 60s, that took some of it. And so then all those people that were living right there north of the high school got pushed out. And some of them moved to other places in Santa Monica, some of them in that time period. And then the Ocean Park area south of Pico, African Americans were living in that area around Phillips Chapel Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. And a lot of them owned property or rented, and some got bought out for redevelopment. But there's still some African-American property owners that are still there, families that have been there since the early part of the 20th century that still own, land that was passed down.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that question. It looks like Evelyn Evelyn, are you able to unmute yourself now? Or Lisa, perhaps you can help out with that. I know you've been excellent in the background trying to help resolve that issue for Evelyn.
I think the host can also unmute her.
Yeah, I can't do that.
One of the hosts can.
Yeah, Lisa's in the background trying to take care of that.
Okay.
All right, and then Neela, you had your hand raised, but you put it down. So I'm assuming you don't need to ask a question. If you do, please raise your hand again. I'm going to go back to the Q&A, and this is from Ken Bryant. He says, do you get negative feedback from contemporaries for writing and discussing this previously concealed Black history?
Well, from some people, yes, and from others, they're celebratory of the fact that I'm doing it. So it just, there's some white people that are not interested in this history, and they wish it would go away. But particularly down in the South Bay. Okay.
Got it. What has been some of the backlash? I mean, just to follow up on that, what kinds of backlash are you really seeing?
I don't see any backlash. I have a book out. I mean, they don't want to hire me, fine. They don't want to have me come and speak, fine. I have a book out and I stand behind my research and what I have contributed to opening up the narrative about the African American experience and our contribution to building California and to our efforts to come here and enjoy California just like everyone else.
I'm going to ask a question myself, just piggybacking on the history of travel and exclusion. Oh, it looks like Miss Evelyn has her unmute on, so that's great. I'm going to go to Evelyn and then I'll come back to my question. Evelyn, go.
Right, thank you very much. Dr. Jefferson, thank you so very, very much for the information that you shared with us. When you said Valverde, I've been to Valverde several times. So I grew up in the Watts area. We would go to Valverde. That was the place we would go to have sleepovers or picnics. I will be 88 years old next month. And some of the things that you shared with us today, I've never even heard of them. So we're so very happy that you have been able to undertake this event or this challenge, or being able to provide information to us that we need to be able to teach us more about the middle class, which very, very little history in school or any books that I've read, having grown up in the area, it's come across. So thank you so very, very much for all the information. Really, truly appreciate it. And I definitely look into see about getting one of your books. Okay. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So, and we will take care of you, Miss Evelyn. We will take care of you. So we will make sure that you get a book, a signed one.
Sorry to interrupt, Janet.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm super, I never, ever want to interrupt Miss Evelyn. So let her go on as long as she needs to. So in just the history of African-American travel and restrictions, even in local areas, Dr. Jefferson, do you know, or do you have a feeling for what legacy that has for African-Americans today? Have you done any research on that?
Well, that's more of a sociological examination, but yes, I mean, just from the standpoint of what the work that I'm doing around Santa Monica with engaging audiences and thinking about the beach in a wider way. The Coastal Commission supported the project to do the Belmar History Plus Art project because they're looking at trying to encourage Black people and communities of color to go to the beach. And so they want them to go to the beach because they feel comfortable going to the beach. And that could be comfortable because they know a little bit about the history, but it also could be comfortable just because they like the water. But yes, I think that in terms of African Americans, the legacy of discrimination and segregation has, kind of discouraged us from going certain places. I mean, for instance, like the national parks, a lot of, there's a whole body of study that's been done about, African Americans don't go to national parks. Well, there's a couple reasons. One, I mean, in general, okay, we don't go in general. One, it's expensive to go on a vacation. And if you're not a middle-class person and you're, a lesser economically sufficient person, doing that kind of vacation is not that easy. Camping is not easy. You have to buy equipment to do that. And then also there's a legacy of racism that went on in the parks that people don't realize. They did have some of those separate facility signs up, okay, at different points in the Jim Crow era, and people don't remember that. The beach area, if you are inland and you haven't learned how to swim, it may not be something that you get drawn to, okay? So there are things that have discouraged some people, and then, some people are not as comfortable in terms of who they are as Americans, and they feel that because their friends aren't doing it, it's not something they should do, even though it might be something they want to do. So there's a lot of reasons, but I hope that in terms of some of the things that I'm doing, that I've been taking these kids from South Los Angeles out to the beach. I'm going to be working with another group of kids from the Inland Empire. And so we're showing them different experiences that they may not have had the opportunity to think about in terms of, okay, they may have been to the beach, but they may not have learned about the history, or they may not have had an opportunity to learn about ocean sea life where they're playing with it, okay? Now they might have learned something in school, but they get to get out there in the sand and look at the sand crabs and learn about the seaweed and those kinds of things. And then heritage conservation activities in terms of the beach buildings, we're showing them the church, we're showing them where people live, those kinds of things, and helping them to think about their lives in a different way and other people's lives in a different way. And hopefully that will give them some inspiration about their own lives and open up their minds to new professions that they might pursue, and also to different lifestyles that they might pursue.
Yeah, I'm so glad you went in that direction, because there are sometimes a heavy psychological toll that the history plays, especially on African Americans in the United States. I don't think any one of us is immune from that.
We're not. Some of us are a little more able to overcome it at many moments, but every once in a while, there's something that says, oh, I'm not sure whether I should do that.
It'll pop up, right? There's one other question, I'm going to ask it. I'm not sure if this is in your area of expertise, but Kendrick is asking, how can we as allies help close the gap on racial inequality and income gap? Would defund the police and putting more dollars into social programs help? And he has a follow-on to clarify, through education and learning more about the American history and giving more opportunities in entrepreneurship to the communities. And Kendrick, I'm assuming you mean to all communities or communities of color or Black communities. Maybe you can clarify that.
Well, Kendrick, you just asked a big question. That question has multiple things that need to be done to engage the African American community in terms of more education funding. And yes, it is looking at maybe redirecting some of the resources that are spent in policing to putting it in education and after school programs. And then, then we're dealing with corporate America. Okay, so corporate America needs to, open up its doors a little wider again for, Black folks and other people of color. And then in terms of entrepreneurism, it's really difficult for African Americans in that realm because we can't get funding from various sources, whether that be from our families, whether that be from banks, whether that be from hedge funds or seed investors, because we're not in those networks generally to be able to access that money. Okay, there's a few people that get venture capital money, but they've worked really hard to put themselves in those places to get that money. And so, getting your education is certainly going to help you. And the more education you have, the better. And then the other thing is people got to save their money. If you want to be an entrepreneur, then you need to save your money and you need to invest in yourself. And so, and your projects. It's a big question that you're asking that has to be attacked on multiple fronts, which you identified.
Yeah, so true. Thank you for the question, Kendrick. All right, so we're winding to the 6 o'clock hour, and I just want to remind everyone that Dr. Jefferson's book can be purchased. She has generously offered this audience a 50% discount and free shipping on that book if you use the discount code that's in the chat right now. So please take note of that. There's a website as well that you can go on and do that purchase for that book. So we are so appreciative of that, Dr. Jefferson.
There's a misunderstanding. The publisher will send the book to them.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but we have from Dr. Jefferson another signed copy that we would like to give away. So if we can get the wheel ready, and as soon as we do that, we have some final comments, and then that should be our time. But we'd love to give away this second book.
All right, let me get the wheel up. You guys have to tell me when you see it on your screen.
We see it.
You see it, okay. And here we go. And again, everybody must be present to win. We'll have to get your address. Let's see what the wheel tells us.
This is a very cool little thing.
Isn't it?
Well, deliberately fair housing resources some awesome things. So we got a pretty well-oiled machine here now. And it looks like, I hope she's still on here. Do you guys see the winner?
Kama
Burton. Is Kama still here?
One of our fearless leaders. Is she not here? She's here.
She's still here. Awesome.
I'm
Comma,
seeing,
just
oh, there she is. Yay.
private message.
Congratulations, comma.
I'm going to stop sharing. Congratulations, comma, Miss Lucky. Send a Crystal direct message on your address so we can get the book over to you as well.
Yeah, we'll get it to you. So I wanted to quickly, I know we're right at 6, unless my clock is fast. I wanted to just say this has been very enlightening. This is a slice of heaven. This is history, as has been said, that we don't get. You know, we are multifaceted, and the Black middle class, the Black traveler, the Black leisure sect is a very important part of our history and our today and our culture. So thank you, Dr. Jefferson, for enlightening us and sharing a little bit about that, for making your book available. Get the book, great read, lots of good information. I wanted to also thank our partners in this, Deliberately Fair Housing. You guys stepped up and really helped us hit it out the park with this one. We hope that there's more collaborations in the future, but thank you so much for lending us your space, for helping us with this. And just, I can't say enough about you guys. Love y'all. Thank you to Jennifer. I'm not sure she's still on. Jennifer from California Association of Realtors, who introduced Dr. Jefferson earlier. She's just, she came right on in and said, yeah, let me know what you want me to do. And she did it. And so I totally appreciate her for that. She is our treasurer. She probably had to leave, but that's okay. Send our well wishes on to her and let her know she did a great job and we love her for that. She left another meeting just to come and join us. So, and of course, the California Association of Black Real Estate Professionals. You guys, my people, I just want to say, in such a short period of time, we have done a lot. There is a lot more to come. This was our first program, our first event. We will have programming throughout the month of Black History Month of February. So stay tuned on the socials. You'll see the calendars, you'll see flyers from us. Stay tuned, look out for that. And thank you again. Any last words you want to say, Dr. Jefferson?
I just really thank you guys for inviting me to participate. And I do hope that you guys will read the book, because there's some interesting real estate stories in there. And so, you know, I hope you'll look at it. And then you can learn more about my work at my website, AlisonRoseJefferson.com. And I was putting that in the chat, but however that works.
Great.
Yeah, you guys can, and you know, if you want to contact me after you read the book because you had some thoughts, reach out through my website.
Fantastic. I also do want to thank a real special thank you to the California Association of Realtors, who helped sponsor this event and help bring Dr. Jefferson to the forefront with us. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And don't forget, if you guys are not already members and part of the Deliberately Fair Housing Facebook group, please reach out, join us. We are now on Instagram. We just got that account set up and we're ready to rock and roll on that. And we're creating a YouTube page so that all of this, or did I say page? YouTube channel, so that all of this great content and information can live there as well. So don't forget about us, Deliberately Fair Housing. We do at least 1 or 2 of these deliberate talks a month. And we also do a book club, and that's coming up on the 25th, and we're reviewing Black Wealth. So join us for that when we do that talk. All right. Anything else, Crystal, before we wrap it up?
I think that's it. We have
Okay.
brand new IG account also. We have a Facebook page. You'll be hearing more from us. You'll be seeing more of us. So again, thank you, Dr. Jefferson, enlightening. And
thank you for helping
Deliberately
us
Fair
kick off
Housing,
Black
guys.
History Month, right?
Yeah, this was a great kickoff. Did you have any other? And thank you all for joining us. We had a good turnout. This is on Facebook Live. We will have the link to replay it for anyone who's missed, but tell a friend. This was a good one. And anyone else have any closing remarks before we
Nope, I think that's it.
sail into the sunset?
All right,
yes,
thank you,
it's
everyone.
It's the dinner and wine hour, so we
It
won't
is.
keep you.
Everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Jefferson.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye everyone. Thank you.